There's a lot wrong with Disney Star Wars, but nothing butters my biscuits more than how they have mishandled lightsabers and lightsaber crystal lore. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Luke, I own Aegis Lightsabers, and today we are going to be launching the very first video in a series of videos on lore. We're going to be doing everything from reviews, Star Wars reviews, we're going to be doing movie reviews, video game reviews, live reactions, fan content. We're going to be talking about the new AI stuff that's coming out. We're going to be talking about the news around Star Wars that's coming out. Anything and everything Star Wars related, you can find it right here, so stick around. But anyway, let's get back to the video at hand. Lightsaber lore, specifically Kyber crystal lore. Disney has completely just lost their minds with how lightsabers work. I mean, half the time they are super lethal and they work exactly how they should, how they've always worked over the entire time that we saw them in the films, books, video games. They cut through everything. They cut through anything and everything except for another lightsaber or cortosis. We'll get to that at some point. But yeah, no, according to Disney, they just don't work whenever they need the script to basically have them not work, or they need a specific character to just survive what would otherwise be a mortal wound. Yeah, we're looking at you, Disney Plus. But it would take me forever to outline all of those other issues, so we're going to keep it really short. We're going to keep it truncated down to specifically Kyber crystal lore. So let's start from the very beginning, shall we? What exactly is a Kyber crystal? So if you are like me and you just have way too much time on your hands, or you were just a outcast child and all you did was read Star Wars books growing up, then you probably came across the book Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which is from 1978 and was a follow-up book to the original film that came out in 1977, Star Wars A New Hope. And in that book, it features a race between Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Darth Vader as they attempt to locate and acquire the mythical Kyber crystal. This Kyber crystal was a rumored artifact that was very ancient, semi-sentient, and would drastically enhance of the user who possessed it. And it made for a great story. I highly recommend you go and read it. In the expanded universe that would come to follow over the next probably about 30 years worth of books and comic books, Kyber crystals would change a little bit over the years. In the expanded universe, after Splinter of the Mind's Eye, you would see Kyber crystals, or the shards thereof, show up in a number of different ways. There's a few noteworthy specifics that I'll get into. Specifically, you have the shard that Leia has and has in her lightsaber that she actually carried from her adventure in the story in Splinters of the Mind, or Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and that she would then install in her own lightsaber at a later point in the story. You have the Dark Lady Lumia, I guess however you pronounce that had a number of shards that she had collected over her lifetime that she used to power her light whip. And then you also have a couple of instances where Luke Skywalker directly mentions them in the Young Jedi Knights book, specifically the Lightsabers story arc. And we'll get into that later on as well. But essentially, you see Kyber crystals showing up throughout the majority of the expanded universe, and it was not a well-established, but if you were looking, you would find it. Fast forward a little bit, and you get to the Clone Wars TV show, and you really don't see much happen with Kyber crystals outside of one mention in Season 2 in the story arc where Cad Bane is looking for a Jedi holocron, and they needed a Kyber crystal in order to unlock it, but it was mentioned as a singular artifact. It wasn't one of many, if you will. And we don't see that be revisited until Season 5, where the Younglings arc, they go to Ilum, they go get their crystals, they're instructed by Yoda to go through their trial, essentially. So let's break down exactly what the EU says Kyber crystals are and what they were not, because that's a really important distinction, and it's going to matter when we start talking about how Disney changed things and what they kept the same. So according to the old expanded universe, the Kyber crystal was a singular artifact that you then had splinter into many shards. There's also some maybe small inconsistencies, especially in, like I said, the Young Jedi Knights book, where Luke talks about Kyber crystals. He does get into that, and I will talk about it in greater detail. What the expanded universe never implicitly or explicitly implies is that Kyber crystals are the only way to power a Jedi's lightsaber. In fact, the opposite is true. It is stated that on numerous different occasions throughout the majority of the expanded universe, no matter if you're talking comic books, video games, and literature, that any crystal could be used for that. And they have names for all of those things. If you played Coder 1 and Coder 2, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. If you looked at the any of the like chronological, like omnibus style encyclopedias, like the Essential Guide to the Galaxy or the Essential Guide to Characters, Essential Guide to Planets, things like that, you would find little tidbits here and there. And there are 3 noteworthy that I want to talk about as they relate to lightsaber crystals. The first one is going to be the planet of Ossus, which was a library planet. It was a planet that had a Jedi presence on it, and during one of the old Republic wars between the Sith and the Jedi, it was destroyed. And as such, access to the caves on Ossus, or the naturally occurring crystals, if you will, was lost to the Jedi. You then had the caves on Dantooine, which you explore in great detail in both Coder 1 and Coder 2. Coder 2, you have the remnants of it as the Jedi Civil War is over at that point, and you have basically the remnants as what's left of Revan's army, essentially now under the control of Darth Sion and Darth Nihilus, are essentially waging war on the Republic at the time, and they're basically at the edge of their breaking point. In fact, it's stated in the game that if you do not intervene, the systems that you visit throughout the course of the campaign will fall, and thus the Republic will crumble. So it's a very critical and often missed story beat in that game. But I digress. Essentially, you have, like I said, Ossus, you have Dantooine, and then you have also Ilum. Ilum is going to be probably the most noteworthy planet of mention, as it is featured in several of the TV shows, specifically the Clone Wars short-lived cartoon series that was on Cartoon Network before the Clone Wars that we all know was then released in 2005, I believe, 2008. Don't quote me on that. Ilum, though, being the most noteworthy exception, where the majority of Jedi Saber crystals came from. And there are numerous explanations for this. In the old expanded universe, it was said the reason for that is because all of the other systems where naturally occurring crystals were basically just under the control of the Separatists or were just no longer available to the Jedi, and so they just relied on Ilum exclusively. They, again, never implied that a crystal found on Ilum is the only place for a Jedi's crystal to come from, but it is also where we see them go more often than not. With a couple of exceptions, after the New Republic is founded under Luke Skywalker, he does make note that there just is no existing cache of crystals to be chosen from, and there's no place for him to send his new Jedis to find their crystals. And so he essentially explains that there are ways to make any crystal work, and that was the norm under duress or circumstances where a traditional method of harvesting a Kyber crystal could not be attained. And we see that clearly exemplified in novels such as I, Jedi, which is absolutely my favorite expanded universe storyline, which is the story of Corran Horn as he attempts to locate his wife, and he gets embedded with pirates since he has a background in detective work, and he just goes on this like year-long excursion of just the seedy underbelly of the crime syndicates looking for his taken wife. And the story takes some really interesting turns. I highly recommend you go and read that. But anyway, in that novel, he does end up constructing a lightsaber near the ending portion of the novel from just random bits of what he has available to him. And they do name certain crystals directly that he then uses and experiments with to try to get it to work. And it actually ends up failing a couple of times before he gets the combination correct. And why is this important to mention? Well, one thing, it really just kind of dispels the idea that like lightsabers are this like mythical, I guess you could like a Harry Potter wand, where it's like you did it right the first time and it's there forever, and when they lose the saber, it's catastrophic to them because it was part of who they were. Well, I guess that could be said, I guess, of anything, but there is nothing explicitly stated or implicitly stated that would indicate that. We actually see that sabers are used as tools more often than not, and they are treated as such. And when a Jedi loses one, they simply construct another. The best case example of that is going to be in the Shadows of the Empire novel, where Luke, having lost his original lightsaber, Anakin's original lightsaber, to Darth Vader on Bespin, he then goes to Tatooine and constructs a new lightsaber and uses an artificial crystal because, again, there's no place to just go find a crystal in his time. All of it would be under the control of the Empire. And Old Ben had documents that he left behind that explained how, under cases of extreme duress or war, Jedi could construct an artificial crystal. And this was done very painstakingly, and it was an extremely dangerous process. And to get it wrong would be catastrophic. See the duel between Brachus and Luke, where one of his first students constructs a lightsaber while being basically tormented by the spirit of Exar Kun, an ancient dark Jedi that basically embodied one of the Masasi temples on Yavin 4, and basically helped, not Brachus, Gantoris was his name, helped Gantoris to create a lightsaber that actually was called dual phase lightsaber. And this was actually a really unique and really cool idea where you could simply rotate the hilt and it would align a secondary crystal, which would extend the length. Extremely cool idea. We really haven't seen that feature too much more. There are rumors that Darth Vader's lightsaber was a dual phase. I happen to think that's because David Prowse, the original bodybuilder who played Darth Vader in the 1977 film before the second actor that took his place took over for him, just towered over Mark Hamill. And so he had a longer lightsaber because of that. I have never seen anything to substantiate that. It's just simply one of those like tidbits of information you pick up while being a nerd about Star Wars. Anyway, let's continue. But the key takeaway, and the one thing I want you to remember about everything I just said about the old expanded universe, is that Kyber crystals were rare. They were not common. They could not be found in abundance. And if you had one, it was incredibly rare. And yes, they were primarily used in lightsaber construction because of the special properties they had that made them ideal for that task. And we see that further substantiated in the Clone Wars, where Hondo specifically states that Kyber crystals, naming them as such, and we see them carried forward and being called that from hereafter, he specifically says they're incredibly rare and extremely valuable. And that's going to be really critical when we get into the next part of this, which is how Disney treated Kyber crystals. So, this is where the Disney shift really starts to take place. So in 2012, Disney acquires LucasArts and Lucasfilm and all of its related media from George Lucas. They then basically ended everything that was currently in production. That included 1313, RIP, that would have been a great game. The Clone Wars essentially ended at season 5. It would be picked up and then it would be continued on for 6 and 7. 7 being kind of a shorter season, 6 being kind of the truly longer one. But anyway, it was effectively, the show was done at 5. And that's really where I want to focus on, because in 2012, at the very end of the year, right around November, December, when the episode came out, when the Younglings arc was just finishing, we saw the standardization of what Kyber crystals would become moving forward, where they are called Kyber crystals, and it is mentioned specifically that that is what Jedi use for their sabers, which is really just something we saw in the expanded universe anyway. It just wasn't as, I guess you could say, uniform, where any crystal could have been used, but Kyber crystals were preferred. We now see in the Clone Wars that it's exclusively Kyber crystals, but it doesn't say you couldn't use another crystal, it's just that's what is used. Maybe an oversight, I don't really know. But anyway, when Disney takes over, it does become simply just a matter of anything but is. Or in other words, Kyber crystals and nothing else. Here's where we get some problems. So, if we are to believe that, then everything else must also be true. As Disney said that the only thing they would carry over to be canon would be the films. And they've played fast and loose with some of the video games. They really have been cagey about it, not really identifying things like, is the Old Republic, as seen in KOTOR 1 and 2 canon? Is SOTOR, Star Wars The Old Republic, the extremely long-run MMORPG that it currently is still live, that took over for Star Wars Galaxy? Is that canon? It's a gray area, but they did say specifically that the films are. So what does that matter for the topic of this video? Well, Hondo says in the previous season, as I mentioned, season 5, episode 7, that Kyber crystals used for lightsaber construction are rare and valuable. So with that being said, somebody please explain to me how the Empire was able to harvest the massive, overwhelming number of them needed to construct the Death Star, because apparently, according to Disney now, that is what the super laser was constructed from, that Jyn Erso's father, Galen Erso, used as basically like a reverse engineering of lightsaber technology, apparently, to create the super laser, because that would be cooler. Remember what I said about science fiction and fantasy, with them trying to get more science fiction-y, but also trying to stay super fantasy? I think it's both. I don't have a problem with that. But here's where I do have a problem: when you get lazy with your storytelling. And this is clearly what I think is a massive plot hole. There are tons of them. This is just one of them. But if they are so rare and they are so valuable, despite the fact that the Empire seems to have entire shipments of them, truckloads worth, essentially, to create a planet-sized super laser assembly, just suspend your disbelief for a second and try to just go with it, turn your brain off. So that the Ghost crew, Ezra and the rest of them, as they attempt on numerous occasions to steal these shipments of Kyber crystals that are being shipped off to the Empire for the secret project that is labeled, and for the secret project that we would know to be the Death Star project. This, to me, is just lazy storytelling at its finest. I mean, on one hand, they want us to believe that Kyber crystals are rare, special, and that they are exceedingly valuable, while in the very next chapter showing us that there's entire truckfuls of them just lingering around. But again, they can't be that rare or that valuable, because we see, again, in Rogue One, Jyn Erso's mother giving her one right before they basically place her in the bunker before she's taken, essentially. So they were researchers, they were studying Kyber crystals, but how did they just simply just nick one from the stash? They're just like, oh, there's this massive pile of Kyber crystals. I'm just going to take one so that I can just take it home, because it's not like it's a controlled substance. It's not like the Empire is controlling everything, watching everything. It's not like there's extra levels of security, like a clean room or anything like that. There's massive piles of them laying around where we can just take one. It's barely an inconvenience. I don't know, maybe I'm just reading into it, but it just seems to be a bit of an issue. Not to mention, we just probably need to talk about the elephant in the room. The Death Star doesn't need to be run off Kyber crystals. In fact, that comes off as just a lame repurposing because somebody thought it would be cool. Just like we didn't need to know that hyperspace motivators needed a special kind of fuel in order to jump into hyperspace. This is not Star Trek. We don't need to have some super anal explanation as to how it worked.
Starboard nacelle sustained a direct impact, venting drive plasma.
Initiating emergency core shutdown. Inertial dampers failing.
Again, Star Wars is fantasy, but it also can be science fiction. But when you get too autistic about the science fiction, it just becomes contrived, and we see what you're doing. So basically, it seems like Disney needs Kyber crystals to be whatever they need them to be for the moment. Essentially, it's just a MacGuffin to move the story along, which really is just par for the course. I mean, that's how most things work in Disney Star Wars these days, where it's like, oh yeah, pick that thing that, somebody will remember, because we're just not going to use anything from the expanded universe, while at the same time, we're going to strip mine it for anything that sounds cool, repurpose it, not really use it the way it should have been, which proves that we don't understand it, and then we're just going to throw it in there because the fans will like it. That's fan service. So yeah, I'm going to rest my case with that one. I think the expanded universe definitely treated lightsaber crystals as a much more utilitarian resource that was in extreme rarity. They had better explanations for how everything worked, and when something did not need an explanation, we didn't get one, because the story is what mattered. It wasn't about the science fiction. Again, this is not Star Trek. We don't need to understand how warp drives work, and Data's not there to, mansplain to the entire crew about how the, nitty-gritty works, or Scotty for that matter. Data didn't really do that. That would have been Geordi? Oh, this isn't a video about Star Trek. Anyway, so yeah, Kyber crystals. They were way cooler back in the day. They were rare, they were special. If you had one, it was something to be treasured. Granted, you could use other things, and I loved doing that, especially in the Knights of the Old Republic games. I remember being a kid and running across special ones in the Tomb of Tulak Horde, or traversing the Roshire trees as you get to the hidden Shadowlands on Kashyyyk to get to the Starforge and the different crystals you would encounter along the way, or going to the Dantooine Caves for the first time in KOTOR 2, or in KOTOR 1, and then revisiting them in KOTOR 2 and like having the psychic impression that Revan left on it. It was better, guys. It just was better. And this isn't nostalgia. It just was better. Because we didn't need it to be mystical, and we didn't need it to be standardized in order for it to be cool. Lightsaber crystals were a means to an end. The lightsaber is what was special. We don't necessarily need to know everything about the crystals that are going into it. Just know that only a Jedi could align them correctly. That was kind of the critical component, not necessarily that Kyber crystal plus part equals saber. It was more like only a Jedi could even properly identify the kind of Kyber crystal needed in order to use the lightsaber. In the old universe, anyway. In the new, it just really is you just pick one up, have the parts, put it together, and it works. It's like Legos. I don't like that. It just really, in my opinion, it really ruins the mythos of what it was. And there's just so much about the expanded universe that just is completely unexplained, unexplored, and there's just a lot of ignorance about it. But anyway, I wanted to do a deep dive on this because as a lightsaber enthusiast, I care deeply about the lore surrounding lightsabers. I have many of them. I have new ones coming out, spoiler alert. And I have a huge respect for the custom community that has just thrived for years before Disney on creating all of these custom and unique lightsabers that were inspired by the books. And now we just have these just soulless phasers, essentially. Don't even get me started on crystal bleeding. I will make a video on that at some point, but that's not the purpose of this video. Disney essentially turned Kyber crystals into the AA of the Star Wars universe, and I think the most critical reason for that is to create FOMO, because they sell them at the Disney parks for their shitty knockoffs of good quality lightsabers that the community has been making for forever. Guys like Rob Petcow and Genesis Custom Sabers to be like my inspiration for why Aegis Sabers exists in the first place. I mean, these guys cared about it. It was a trade craft to them, and we were all deeply, deeply saddened when he announced that Genesis Custom Sabers was no longer going to be open for business. I'll never get my hands on a Corran Horn lightsaber unless one of you wants to send one to me for review, and I could convince you to let me sell it. You will send me your copy of a Corran Horn. But anyway, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up there. I had a great time making this video. I hope you had a good time watching it. If you liked the video, like the video. The algorithm loves it when you leave a comment, and it is a sacrifice to the YouTube gods. If you didn't like the video and you have your reasons why, that's okay. This is my video, go make yours. May the Force be with you, and I will see you guys next time.